You know, it's a fascinating thing to be living and walking in the streets and lanes where important events took place which shaped our country's past. And as you know, we are fortunate as Vermonters to live so close to the places where Vermonters played a crucial role in our struggle for freedom from the British. Perhaps as fascinating is the story of a tough and determined old soldier from Manchester who is part of the very fabric of Vermont's fight for freedom. I give you Major Gideon Ormsby.
Gideon Ormsby reporting, Major in the War for Independence, 1775 to 1783. Green Mountain Boy, Windsor Convention, State of Vermont Legislature, at your service. I can't say that when my dear mother of blessed memory named me Gideon, that she knew that just like Gideon of old, I would be facing a battle in which I'd be vastly outnumbered by a tremendously superior foe. But isn't that exactly what happened in the Revolutionary War? We were outnumbered by a tremendous military empire that was the greatest on earth at the time. However, as great as they are, as great as they weren't as great as the spirit and the spark of liberty that dwelled in the breasts of the colonials who sought freedom. Yes, people said, "Oh, Gideon, zealous, aren't you? Zealous, yes. I was zealous. Zealous to live and to breathe free." People said, "You going up against the greatest military empire in the world? Preposterous." Yes, perhaps it was. But go up against them we did, and something else we did. We won. We won, and because of that, we stand here today in freedom and liberty, in a country kissed with the blessings of liberty and a charter that declares all men are created equal. So I'm kind of glad, after all, that my mother named me Gideon. You know that fellow in the Bible who with just 300 men overcame thousands? Of course, just like that Gideon, our victory was not complete just on our own strength, as important as that was. Without Almighty God behind us and the providential hand of the Creator, I can't say that we would have won. But you know, perhaps the reason He was behind us was because we stated in our charter, we declare that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because we acknowledge Almighty God in the founding charter, perhaps that is why He came to our aid in so many spectacular and unpredictable ways. You know what that word unalienable means? Unalienable is a big word that says nobody could take it away from you. So the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness being unalienable, that means nobody could take it away. Not the King of England, not his armies, not his whole empire. Speaking of the King of England, could you imagine the look on the King's face when his lackeys came to him and said, "Begging your pardon, Your Majesty, but I must tell you that the colonials, they're saying that all men are created equal and that they're equal to you, Your Majesty." And King George would have said, "What? That rabble? Those Yankees saying they're equal to me, His Majesty, Supreme Ruler of Great Britain? Well, we'll show them." But he didn't show us. We showed him. In fact, you want to hear a little factoid that most people don't know about? The other George, George Washington, was the biggest enemy of King George III, wasn't he? Because he led the successful revolution. And King George III hated George Washington. But after the war, when George Washington had been the president for 2 terms and voluntarily relinquished power, stepped down from power, and the word of it came to King George III that George Washington had relinquished power freely and voluntarily, do you know what he said? He said, if George Washington has truly stepped down from presidency without being forced to, then he, George Washington, is the greatest man alive. When your enemies say that you're the greatest man alive, you have done something to move mountains, haven't you? Oh, I realize I'm talking kind of tough and proud right now, but there were times that tried my soul. Living in Manchester, Vermont, one night, the Tories, you know what Tories are? The Tories are the Americans who stayed on the side of the British. And there were a lot of them in Manchester, and they hated me. And they came to my house one night, and it wasn't to invite me to a dinner party. When they found that I wasn't there, they took my boy Daniel, who's about your age. They took my boy Daniel, kidnapped him, put a red coat on him, marched him over Equinox Mountain, knowing we would pursue, thinking we would shoot our own boy. Well, we caught up with them all right, but it wasn't our boy that got shot that night. And we got our boy back safe. Thank God. But I never will forget that. You see, my father brought us here from Rhode Island to Romania, New York, and then here, saying that we could live and breathe free on our own big piece of land that we could farm freely. And I can promise you, he didn't bring us here so that we could live with the heel of British boots on our necks. So when the time came for me to step forward, I knew what I had to do. Well, I guess I was in it all the way. Green Mountain boy, Council of Safety, Dorset, Windsor Convention, state legislature. But I'm most proud that the tombstone in Manchester, Vermont, simply mentions me as a major in the war for freedom, of which I'm most proud. So you young folks, be vigilant, because there will always be people who wish to re-enslave you. Even some perhaps who reside in our own governments, God forbid. As my famous colleague and comrade in arms, Patrick Henry, declared, is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death. May the great God Jehovah long protect the United States of America. Thank you for your kind attention.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our forefathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any other nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our full power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember, what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us here to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth.
Now we also have with us today a budding historian who has a metal detector and has taken his metal detector all over places in Vermont, both places of history and places that nobody knew were historic, and discovered wonderful artifacts buried in the ground. And I'm going to invite Netanel Crisp to come up and talk with you a little bit about it before he invites you to take a look at some of these artifacts. Netanel, would you come up?
I'd just like to start again and thank you both for coming and for all of you for coming. From the presentations that you just witnessed to the presentations you're about to see, I hope that you have gained some insightful knowledge about those people and events that help shape our state's history, our country's, and our world's history, and that help bring about and shape the world that we have today. So without further ado, I would like to invite all of you to go over and see some of my finds that I made over the last 4 years throughout the state of Vermont. I've been metal detecting everywhere I can, looking for historic relics and coins and other objects that help restore and give insight into the people that came before us. So without further ado, thank you. And you got a bunch of other stuff. I have 4 musket balls from the American Revolution that I found in a camp that Ethan Allen stayed at on his way to attack Fort Ticonderoga in 1775, which was one of the first American victories, technically, of the war. So those are really neat, yeah, and especially when we can see the Bennington Monument right across, it's pretty awesome to have these with us today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I wouldn't want one of those fired at me.
No.
You can also see these are Civil War bullets, so they're even larger. Oh yeah. So that's actually a reproduction, but you can feel how heavy it is. These are the originals. They're made of lead. This was actually given to me.
I was going to ask if those were those.
They are, yeah. Those are all lead, yeah. So if you didn't get it out, lead poisoning was also.
Those would get hurt.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually ironic. They used lead in everything up until kind of the turn of the century, early 1900s. So this pewter spoon.
No dual.
No. Yeah.
This one's pretty
This one?
rusty too.
Oh,
Yeah, it's all made out of iron,
yeah,
so it.
Let's see if we can place it back the way it was there.
Perfect.
Very,
Awesome.
Very careful with us.
Yeah, it's remarkable that so much of this stuff has survived so long. My pleasure.
All right.